For more insight on Ella Rude and what her arrest may mean, we're joined now from CNN Center by Ken Schiffman. He was the executive producer of In the Footsteps of Bin Laden. Ken, thanks so much for joining us. It must have been such a fascinating meeting when you met her in 2006. She does not give many interviews, so it was a huge scoop for you. How did you find her, and how did you land the interview?
Well, Pauline, it really was done by Paul Cruikshank, one of our colleagues. Peter Bergen was doing a book called The Osama Bin Laden I Know, and in 2005, Paul managed to get an interview for that book. Our documentary happened about a year later, but it took Paul about 6 months, lots of phone calls, lots of time talking to Malika to convince her to go on. But eventually, she agreed to be interviewed for the documentary, which, as you said, is extremely rare to have someone like this to go on camera.
And I understand the interview was in her apartment. What was it like when you walked in, and what was your immediate impression of her?
Well, as you've seen in some of the clips you're rolling, you might be able to tell it's a very tiny place, Pauline. It's a small apartment in Switzerland, very stark, unadorned really, not much on the walls, very neatly kept. When she first came to the door, she was very polite. She was a great hostess. In fact, while we were setting up all of our equipment, she offered us an array of cakes, Moroccan tea, just a really delightful hostess. You wouldn't suspect from how she was treating us who she is, maybe, or what her passion is. And she was gracious all the way up until she got ready for the interview, at which point she put many more veils on. When we first arrived, you could see her face, but as we were preparing for the interview itself, she, as you could see there, put on veils to the point where all you could see was her eyes. And as she did that, she transformed. She became much more intense.
We should give some background on her. She's partly well known because of her husband. 2 days before September 11th, 2001, her husband was the one who posed as a journalist and killed the anti-Taliban warlord Ahmed Shah Massoud on the orders of Osama bin Laden. Did she talk about that, and did she also talk about Osama bin Laden more in depth in your interview?
Yes, I mean, the reason she agreed to do the interview eventually was apparently she wanted to proclaim her love for Osama bin Laden. And she did that, and she was very passionate. When she talked about him in the interview, you could feel that she meant it. I mean, she talks about his lovely face. She talks about what a beautiful man he is. And she would do anything for him. She believes in him and in his cause.
Now, you had said that you could see her transform when she put on her veil, and she actually writes openly on the internet recruiting people for jihad, and she especially encourages women to support their men who are jihadists. Where is this ideology coming from?
It really comes from her first husband, according to the research that Paul Cruikshank has done. When she met him, before she met him, she was not devout at all. She went to bars, she drank alcohol, but once she met him, she changed. She became devout and became radicalized because of her marriage to him. And her ideology matches up with anything else you might find from someone who believes in Al-Qaeda. It's a belief that the West is at war with Islam, that something has to be done about the Palestinian plight. She writes about America should be destroyed, that U.S. forces in Iraq should be massacred.
And it's interesting, Ken, isn't it, that she didn't start out becoming a devout Muslim. In fact, she was quite the opposite, wasn't she?
Yes, she was. As I mentioned, she went to bars, she drank alcohol, which is not generally the sign of someone who's devout, but clearly she had a change in her life and has remained not just devout, but obviously radicalized. And authorities believe dangerous because she is a recruiter. She is someone who tries to encourage people to take up the cause. Her second husband is now somewhere in the Pakistan-Afghanistan region, and according again to research from Paul Cruikshank, is now a key player for Al-Qaeda. He connects European radicals with Al-Qaeda members in Afghanistan and Pakistan.
Ken Schiffman, CNN executive producer, thanks so much for giving us some really interesting color on this person. We appreciate it. Thank you, Ken.
Thank you, Pauline.